Hello, good evening and welcome to today's broadcast of MGBC. Today is Friday, June the 1st, 2018. It's the first day of June. And I'd like to invite you to join us for a passage from the Bible. If you have a Bible, please can you turn with me to John chapter 7. Verse 45, 46. This Bible passage is the time when the chief priests and the temple guards, they were trying to arrest Jesus because they conspired together to arrest him, and they thought that Jesus was dangerous, a dangerous man. They felt very threatened. These were religious leaders during the time of Jesus, when Jesus was ministering. Jesus, if you remember, Jesus actually threw out the money changers, the tax collectors in the temple tax collectors. Jesus threw them out, and they were incensed. The religious leaders were incensed. They asked him, by whose authority are you doing these things? Throwing our tax collectors out of the temple. You were not given this authority from us. And if you remember, Jesus was jealous. He was jealous, not in a human jealousy, but in a jealousy. He was jealous for his Father's name. And he said to those, you have made my Father's house into a den of robbers. And my Father's house, as Zechariah said, one of the prophets said, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. And so the religious leaders were incensed. They hated him, and they were determined to kill him by any means. They were people who would by any means kill him, Jesus Christ. And what happened here? They sent some temple guards. In verse 45 it says, finally the temple guards went back to the chief priests and Pharisees, who asked him, why didn't you arrest him? Why didn't you bring this man in? And they said, no one ever spoke the way this man does. The guards declared. The chief priests answered, you mean he has deceived you also? These were the Pharisees, okay? The Pharisees, if you remember, in the time of Jesus, there was three particular groups of religious leaders. There was the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Herodians. Okay, and the Herodians were another sect that we don't know much about, but we know that they were probably a splinter group from the Pharisees, who were more proactive, and they were called Herodians, probably because from the king who was called Herod, and they were Herodians who followed Herod more than the other religious leaders. Herod was the king, if you remember, the king of Israel and Judah at that time, but he was a very evil king. He tried to kill Jesus when he was a boy. But anyway, if you look in verse 47, it says, you mean he has deceived you also? The Pharisees retorted. Has any of the rulers or the Pharisees believed in him? No, but this mob that knows nothing of this law, that's the soldiers belonging to Herod, there is a curse on them. Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus earlier and who was one of their own number, asked, does our law condemn anyone without first hearing him to find out what he is doing? They replied, are you from Galilee? Look into it, and you will find that a prophet does not come out of Galilee. Jesus, if you remember, Jesus was at that time living in Galilee, and he had chosen all his disciples from Galilee. They were mostly fishermen from Galilee. But Jesus was originally, if you remember, he was born in Bethlehem, but he moved to Nazareth. When he was a teenager, he was living in Nazareth. And when people saw the miracles that he was doing, they said, this man is from Galilee. How can he be the Christ? The Christ has to come from Bethlehem, right? But Galilee is far from Bethlehem, okay? And so they said, this is not the Christ. And they were very scared of this man. They thought he was just a insurrectionist. Insurrectionist means a revolutionary. Wow, this reminds me, this week, if you've been following the newspapers this week, if you've been following the news, from last Friday, there was a man in the UK, where I come from, there was a man who was arrested outside a court in the city of Leeds in England. And this man, I don't know if you know about what's happening in England at this time. In the north of England, there's been some big scandal. Okay, scandal. It involves children and paedophile. Paedophile means when men or women are attracted to children sexually. Okay, and this man, he's an activist. His name is Tommy Robinson. For the last 10 years, or 7 years, since 2007, when this scandal opened up, he was the first journalist to expose this paedophile scandal. In the cities of North England, in Telford, in Leeds, in Rochester, in Huddersfield, in these northern cities, there are many people who come from Islam. If you know your Quran, if you look in the Quran, actually the Quran and the Prophet Allah, the Prophet Muhammad, Muhammad married a 12 years old girl, right, and had sexual intercourse with her when she was 12. He was a pedophile, okay? But in the Quran, the Muslims follow the Quran, and the Quran says you can marry a 12-year-old. Now, Jesus's mother was actually, according to history, she was 13 years old. She may have even been as young as 12. But if you remember, Joseph didn't have sex with her until after Jesus was born, because Jesus was born by a miracle birth. We call it the virgin birth. Now, what's happening in England, this activist, Tommy Robinson, last year he was arrested, and he was arrested because he was reporting on a rape trial, a paedophile rape trial. And he was arrested by police, and he was brought before a judge, just like Jesus here. He was brought before a judge, but actually Jesus was not brought before a judge. He was brought before a high priest. But Tommy Robinson was brought before a judge last year in the city of Canterbury, which is South England, where I come from. And the judge said to him, you were reporting on a case that was forbidden to report on. This case was given a gagging order. A gagging order means no journalist can report on it, because this individual or these individuals, these people who have been arrested and alleged, they have to have a fair trial and no one should report on it. Okay. Now this man, Tommy Robinson, he was given a 3-month sentence in prison, suspended for 18 months. Okay, suspended means delayed for 18 months. And the judge said, if you go anywhere near another case and report on another case, and you say, you talk about Islamic jihadi pedophiles without knowing the verdict of these people, whether they're innocent or guilty, we will put you in prison. Do you understand, Mr. Tommy Robinson? Do you understand what I'm saying? I will put you in prison if you go anywhere near another court case. And Mr. Robinson said yes, but 6 months later or 3 months later, he was reporting last Friday on another case, which is in the north, in Leeds. And he was reporting on a big scandal involving 29 persons who had raped young children as young as 11 years old, 18 children. Now they're adults. But 5 years ago they had raped them. Okay? And what happens in the north of England, these days there's many dysfunctional families in England. Dysfunctional means that their mother or father are not there. Their mother and father are not in the house, only one single parent. And these young, probably pretty young ladies, girls, terrible. These Muslims, men and women, they were befriending them. Befriending them means, oh, Hi, how are you? Hey, would you like fish and chips? I'm going to buy you some fish and chips. Huh? Would you like some drink? I'm going to give you some drink. Hey, and these young girls, they go home, there's no mummy or daddy. Mummy's probably out working. They've never met their daddy, right? And these young ladies, they come home, they've got nothing to do. They're excited about these people who love them. They said they felt so loved by these men. The first time they've ever felt love in their life. They've never felt love from their own parents. And they felt loved. They felt important. These Muslim men were saying, hey, you're beautiful. Come on, I'm going to take you for a drive, right? Let's be friends. Hey, do you want to go to the park? Hey, I'll buy you a meal. Let's have some fun. And they started out like that, okay? These Muslims, they began, just began little small things. Hey, would you like to take off your shirt like that? Let's take a picture like that. And if these things happen and they go down and down and down because of human sin. And because of the devil is there. And what happened was, in England, terrible things are happening. There's big scandals. This is one scandal. This is 29 people involving one case. They call it sex pedophile grooming gang. Okay, grooming gang. Why grooming? Because grooming means, oh, they're training these girls. They start very small. Oh, I'll buy you a meal. I'll buy you food. Come on, come with me. I'm going to take you in my sports car. These Muslims people, they own restaurants or they own kebab shops, right? They're rich people, okay? Now, what happened was, this is just one case, 29. This is called a paedophile ring. But in England nowadays, in the last 10 years, it's been going on for 40 years. 40 years. And it involves Muslim young men. It involves their fathers. It involves their brothers, their uncles, who had sex with children. And these children were 11 years old. And some of these girls were forced to have sex with young men 15, 20 times at night time. And one of these girls, she had to have an abortion 15 times. And it's a big scandal happening. And you know what? In Britain, in England, the police some of the police forces have covered up this shame, have covered up this big scandal. They've covered it up, the police. They've covered it. The social services have covered it up, right? The police have covered it up. They've become complicit. You know, complicit. Complicit means they actually are with the crime. They're not part of the solution. They're part of the problem. They've covered it up. Even there was a head of social services in the north of England who was one of the paedophile criminals. And so we have this terrible thing, and he was arrested last Friday. And he was arrested by police, and the police said, I'm arresting you for breach of peace. 7 police officers arrested him. He's a journalist who's exposing this evil that's going on. He was arrested, and he was arrested outside the court with the judge looking down and watching him being arrested. And this judge, he asked for this man, Tommy Robinson, to appear before him. And the judge, in the space of 5 hours, okay, between arresting and seeing the judge, 5 hours, the judge, in a few minutes, right, just a few minutes, said to him, Tommy Robinson, we're changing the arrest from breach of peace, which means you were making a noise, but we arrested you on that, but we're changing it to contempt of court, because you're already under contempt of court for another crime, for another thing that you'd committed last year when you were reporting on something that you shouldn't have been reporting on. So your crime is contempt of court. Do you plead guilty? And the judge spoke to the lawyer and said, if your client pleads guilty, we won't send him to prison. But then Tommy Robinson didn't have time to consult with his own lawyer. He had a lawyer provided by the court. And this case is terrible because the judge said to him, the QC Judge Jeffrey Marson said to him, I'm sending you to prison for 13 months. 3 months, which is your previous conviction for talking about a case under a gagging order, and 10 months, you're going into prison. He was sent 30 months in prison. And last Saturday, there was there were so many people in London demonstrating, angry, okay? Angry. They were saying, free Tommy Robinson. And the judge, he put a gagging order on anyone, on any journalist reporting on his case, Tommy Robinson. So this case is really ongoing. And you'll see it in the news. And on June the 7th, there's going to be a big demonstration in London. And last Saturday I watched, even some of them were so angry they were actually climbing the gates of number 10 Downing Street gates, where the Prime Minister lives. Okay, this case is similar to Jesus' case. He was brought before the high priest. First of all, he was brought before a kangaroo court. Kangaroo court means a court which is a joke. It doesn't give full process of law. Jesus was they had already made up their mind. They're going to put him in prison or they're going to kill him. What happened was Annas was the nephew, the brother-in-law of the high priest. If you remember, the high priest, they have a kind of rotary system in the Jewish faith. They have a rotary system of the high priest. Every 3 years it rotates. And this high priest was Cepheus. Cepheus' brother-in-law was Annas, and Annas questioned him. And then Annas brought him to Cepheus. And then Cepheus, later in the day, it was during the night, but then the sun came up and he sent him to the governor, who was Pilate. And this is a kangaroo court. And this case is very similar. It reminded me today. And this Jesus spoke like no other. The Jews said, this man speaks like no other. And they arrested him, but he penetrated them. When Pilate said to him, what is truth? Right? Jesus said, this is the reason I've come to this world, for truth. Today we're living in a day when truth is being taken away. People's rights are being taken away. In my country, we live in a country which looks more and more like North Korea, okay? Where people are not having their rights, where people are being abused, or people are being sent to prison on exposing evil. Even America has come to the rescue. Even Donald Trump's son wrote on a tweet, we are not going to become like England or the UK. And one German MP said, I want to give Tommy Robinson political asylum. So what is this world coming to when the UK and England was supposed to be a bastion of truth and right? This is what we're coming to, where a world is getting darker and darker and darker. We need Jesus. Jesus Christ is the only hope that can save you from this generation of evil. I pray that you would open your heart to Jesus. He is the truth. Jesus said, I'm the way, the life and the truth. No one comes to the Father except through me. Come to the Father through Jesus and know, and He will show you what is real truth and what is evil and error. In Jesus' name, amen.